In a quiet suburban neighborhood surrounded by gentle hills and tall oak trees, life moved at a slow, predictable pace. Karen lived in a modest house on a cul-de-sac with her husband, two kids, and their scruffy golden retriever, Max. The streets were lined with neatly trimmed lawns, colorful flower beds, and the occasional decorative wind chime that tinkled softly in the breeze. It was the kind of place where people waved hello as they passed each other in their cars and left homemade cookies on doorsteps during the holidays. Karen loved her little corner of the world. She enjoyed tending to her garden, chatting with neighbors over coffee, and watching the kids ride their bikes down the smooth, well-paved road that wound through the community. But what Karen didn't realize, what no one really thought about, was that this road wasn't just another piece of shared infrastructure. It belonged to her. Years ago, when Karen's parents bought the land to build their home, they also purchased the private road leading into the development. At the time, it seemed like a practical decision, rather than anything significant. Over the decades, the road became an integral part of the neighborhood, used by everyone without question. No one ever stopped to think about who actually owned it because, frankly, it didn't matter. Until now. Karen had always been friendly but kept mostly to herself. That changed when she decided to join the Homeowners Association, HOA. She saw it as a chance to give back to the community she cared so much about. Serving on the board sounded like a noble way to ensure the neighborhood stayed beautiful and welcoming for years to come. Little did she know, stepping into this role would turn her peaceful existence upside down. The HOA meetings were eye-opening, to say the least. What Karen expected to be discussions about landscaping budgets and annual block parties turned out to be heated arguments over trivial matters. Should mailbox colors match exactly? Was it acceptable for someone to leave a small inflatable pool in their front yard? These debates went on for hours, often ending in raised voices and thinly veiled insults. Karen quickly learned that not everyone approached these issues with kindness or fairness. At first, she tried to stay neutral, offering calm suggestions to diffuse tension. But her efforts only seemed to irritate certain members of the board, especially Linda, the self-appointed queen bee of the HOA. Linda ran things with an iron fist, micromanaging every detail and enforcing rules with ruthless precision. When Karen dared to propose cutting unnecessary expenses to lower monthly dues, Linda took it personally. From that moment on, Karen became a target. Despite the growing tension, Karen never imagined things would spiral out of control. After all, she was just trying to help. But as whispers turned into outright hostility, Karen realized she was walking into a storm, and there was no turning back. What started as a simple desire to contribute to her community was about to become a battle unlike anything she'd ever faced, and the road she never gave much thought to. It would soon become the center of everything. Karen quickly discovered that being part of the HOA board wasn't just about making decisions for the neighborhood. It was like stepping into a battlefield where every word, action, and suggestion could spark conflict. At first, she thought the arguments were harmless squabbles over things like whether someone's rose bushes were too tall or if a neighbor's car was parked in the wrong spot overnight. But soon, she realized there was something deeper at play: power. Some members of the HOA didn't want to solve problems. They wanted control. Linda, the head of the HOA, was particularly intimidating. She had a way of dominating every meeting, cutting people off mid-sentence and dismissing ideas that didn't align with her own vision for the neighborhood. Karen noticed how Linda often singled out certain homeowners for minor infractions while ignoring bigger issues, like the cracked sidewalk near the playground or the streetlight that had been out for weeks. It felt unfair, but when Karen brought it up during a meeting, Linda shot her down immediately. "We have rules for a reason," Linda said sharply, glaring at Karen across the table. "If we start bending them, where does it end?" Things got worse after Karen suggested cutting costs to lower monthly dues. Many residents had complained privately to her about how expensive the HOA fees were, especially since they rarely saw any improvements in return. When Karen presented her idea to reduce spending on non-essential items, like decorative flags for holidays or overly elaborate landscaping projects. She expected support. Instead, she faced resistance. Linda accused her of trying to undermine the HOA's authority and even implied that Karen didn't care about keeping the neighborhood beautiful. The other board members sat silently, unwilling to challenge Linda but clearly uncomfortable. The tension between Karen and the HOA escalated when small penalties began showing up in her mailbox. A letter arrived citing overgrown shrubs along her front yard, even though Karen had trimmed them just weeks earlier. Another claimed her mailbox was leaning slightly to the left, which she found absurd because it looked perfectly fine to everyone else. Each violation came with a fine, starting at $50, but quickly climbing higher as more alleged infractions piled up. By the time Karen received her fifth notice, she owed hundreds of dollars, all for things she didn't think were real problems. When Karen tried to appeal the fines, she hit a wall. The HOA insisted its decisions were final, refusing to reconsider. Every email or phone call she made went unanswered, and her attempts to discuss the matter at meetings were shut down before she could finish speaking. Frustrated and feeling targeted, Karen decided to dig deeper. She hired a lawyer to review the situation and make sure everything was above board. That's when she uncovered something shocking. Not only were many of the violations baseless, but the HOA also hadn't followed proper procedures when issuing the fines. Worse still, the total amount they demanded from her had ballooned to nearly $50,000, a figure so outrageous it made Karen's head spin. As the stress mounted, Karen couldn't help but wonder why this was happening. Was it really about her shrubs or mailbox, or was it punishment for daring to question Linda's leadership? Either way, Karen knew one thing for certain. She wasn't going to back down. This fight wasn't just about money anymore. It was about standing up for herself and proving that no one could push her around. Little did she know, this was only the beginning of a much larger battle, one that would change her quiet suburban life forever. Karen sat at her kitchen table late one night, surrounded by piles of papers and legal documents. The weight of the situation pressed down on her shoulders as she stared at the staggering figure. $50,000. It felt surreal, like something out of a movie where an ordinary person gets caught in an absurd battle against impossible odds. But this wasn't fiction. It was her life, and Karen knew she couldn't let it go unanswered. Her lawyer had spent hours poring over the HOA's actions, pointing out inconsistencies and violations of their own rules. He explained that while the fines were outrageous, there was another detail buried in the fine print of old property records, a detail Karen hadn't thought about in years. Decades ago, when her parents purchased their home, they also acquired ownership of the private road leading into the neighborhood. At the time, it seemed like a minor perk, almost insignificant compared to the land itself. But now, with tensions escalating, this forgotten fact suddenly took center stage. The revelation hit Karen like a bolt of lightning. If the HOA refused to treat her fairly, why should she allow them, and everyone else, to use something that legally belonged to her? She imagined the road as a lifeline connecting the entire community to the outside world. Without it, residents would be stranded. Delivery trucks wouldn't reach their homes. Emergency vehicles might struggle to get through. For years, no one had questioned who owned the road because it didn't matter, but now it mattered more than ever. At first, the idea of blocking access seemed extreme, even to Karen. Wasn't there another way to resolve this? She considered reaching out to neighbors for support, hoping someone would speak up on her behalf. But after a few awkward conversations, she realized most people were too afraid to cross Linda and the HOA. Some sympathized with Karen, but urged her to let it go, rather than escalate things further. Others avoided her altogether, clearly uncomfortable being dragged into the drama. It became painfully clear that if Karen wanted justice, she'd have to fight for it herself. With her mind made up, Karen began planning her next move. She contacted a contractor to install a sturdy gate across the entrance of the private road, along with a sign explaining the situation. She envisioned how shocked her neighbors would be when they saw it, how angry some might feel, how curious others would become. Part of her worried about the backlash, knowing that not everyone would understand her decision. But another part of her felt a spark of determination she hadn't felt in years. This wasn't just about reclaiming what was rightfully hers. It was about sending a message. As Karen finalized the plans, she couldn't help but smile at the irony. For so long, the HOA had treated her like an enemy, piling on fines and refusing to listen to reason. Now, she held the key, literally, to their daily lives. The toll booth idea came to her during a brainstorming session with her husband. What if we charged them to use the road? He joked half-heartedly. Karen paused, then grinned. Why not? If the HOA insisted on treating her like a villain, maybe it was time to play the role. By the time the sun rose the next morning, Karen felt a mix of nerves and excitement. She knew what she was about to do would shake the entire neighborhood and possibly attract attention far beyond it. But she also knew she couldn't keep letting the HOA walk all over her. As she sipped her coffee and watched Max wag his tail at her feet, Karen reminded herself of one simple truth. Sometimes you have to stand your ground, even if it means shaking things up. And that's exactly what she planned to do. The neighborhood woke up to a scene straight out of a movie. At the entrance of their quiet cul-de-sac, where cars usually flowed freely in and out, stood a bright orange construction cone and a shiny metal gate blocking the road. Behind it loomed a freshly painted wooden toll booth, complete with a sign that read, *private property. Access fee required. Beneath the bold letters, smaller text explained the situation. This road is privately owned. All users must pay a nominal fee for access. Karen wasn't there when the first curious neighbor approached the booth early that morning. A man in a suit, clearly late for work, slammed on his brakes and leaned out of his car window. "What's going on here?" he shouted, looking around as if expecting someone to jump out and yell. Surprise. Instead, he found only the toll booth attendant, an older gentleman Karen had hired to manage the operation, calmly explaining the new rules. Word spread quickly. Within hours, the street was lined with frustrated drivers honking their horns, muttering under their breath, or snapping photos to share on social media. Some residents tried driving around the gate, only to find Karen had installed sturdy barriers along both sides of the road. Others attempted to park outside the gate and walk through, but even pedestrians were asked to sign a waiver acknowledging the private nature of the property. It was chaos, and exactly what Karen had hoped for. When Karen finally appeared later that morning, clipboard in hand, she was met with a mix of disbelief, anger, and amusement. One neighbor marched up to her, red-faced and fuming. "Are you serious right now, Karen? A toll booth. What are you trying to do? Hold us hostage?" she demanded. Karen simply smiled politely and gestured toward the sign. "I'm not holding anyone hostage," she replied calmly. "If you want to use my road, there's a small fee. Or you can convince the HOA to drop their ridiculous claims against me." Her response didn't satisfy everyone. Arguments erupted left and right, with some neighbors accusing Karen of being selfish or unreasonable. Others defended her, pointing out that the HOA had gone too far with its fines and harassment. Parents fretted about getting their kids to school on time, while delivery drivers refused to leave packages outside the gate, claiming company policies wouldn't allow it. Even the local garbage truck turned around, leaving trash bins untouched. As the day wore on, the spectacle drew attention from beyond the neighborhood. Reporters arrived, eager to capture footage of the toll booth and interview Karen. When asked why she'd taken such drastic measures, she kept her answers simple and direct. "This road belongs to me," she told one journalist. "For years, I let everyone use it without question. But after the way the HOA has treated me, I don't see why I should continue giving them something for free when they won't even treat me fairly." Social media exploded with reactions. Some commenters praised Karen for standing up to an overbearing HOA, calling her a hero for taking a stand. Others criticized her methods, saying the toll booth punished innocent neighbors instead of targeting the real issue. Memes began circulating online, featuring mock-ups of Karen collecting coins like a medieval gatekeeper or wearing a crown labeled Queen of the Cul-de-sac. The story quickly gained national traction, turning Karen into an overnight sensation. Despite the growing attention, Karen remained unfazed. She knew this wasn't just about teaching the HOA a lesson. It was about proving a point. If people wanted to use her property, they needed to respect her rights. And if the HOA thought she would back down under pressure, they were sorely mistaken. As the sun set on the chaotic first day of the toll booth, Karen stood by the gate, watching as headlights flickered and engines idled in frustration. She felt a strange sense of satisfaction, knowing that for once, the tables had turned. The toll booth became the center of everyone's lives almost overnight. What had once been a quiet, predictable neighborhood was now a chaotic maze of honking horns, frustrated drivers, and heated arguments. Parents struggled to get their kids to school on time. Delivery trucks refused to navigate the blocked road, and garbage bags began piling up outside the gate like a modern-day barricade. The disruption rippled through every corner of the community, turning daily routines into logistical nightmares. For some residents, the toll booth wasn't just inconvenient, it felt personal. A group of neighbors gathered one evening in the cul-de-sac to voice their grievances. "Karen, this isn't fair," shouted Tom, a father of 3 who worked long hours at a nearby factory. "You're punishing us for something we didn't do. Why should our kids suffer because of your fight with the HOA?" Others nodded in agreement, adding their complaints about missed work meetings, spoiled groceries, and canceled Amazon deliveries. But not everyone sided against Karen. Sarah, a retired teacher who lived 2 doors down, spoke up in her defense. "I'm sorry things are tough right now," she said firmly, "but let's not forget how the HOA treated Karen. They fined her $50,000 for nonsense violations that were clearly meant to bully her. If anyone deserves an apology, it's her." Voices rose as the crowd split into factions, some defending Karen and others blaming her for the chaos. Meanwhile, the media circus continued to grow. Reporters camped out near the toll booth, interviewing disgruntled residents, curious passersby, and even Karen herself. One local news station aired a segment titled *Toll Wars, Suburban Standoff, or Wake-Up Call*, that sparked debates across social media. Online forums buzzed with opinions, memes, and petitions, some demanding Karen remove the booth, others urging the HOA to settle the dispute. Strangers from across the country sent messages of support to Karen, sharing stories of their own battles with overzealous homeowner associations. Behind closed doors, the HOA scrambled to respond. Linda called emergency meetings, pacing back and forth as she ranted about Karen's unacceptable behavior. The board members argued among themselves, unsure of how to handle the situation without appearing weak or unreasonable. Some suggested offering a partial refund of Karen's fines to calm her down, while others insisted they couldn't give in to what they saw as blackmail. In the end, they decided to file a formal complaint with the city, claiming Karen's toll booth constituted illegal obstruction and harassment. As tensions escalated, so did the practical challenges. Residents tried creative solutions to bypass the toll booth, like carpooling or parking farther away and walking home. But these fixes only added stress to already strained lives. Parents grew exhausted from waking up extra early to shuttle kids around, while elderly neighbors found the long walks unbearable. Even friendships began to fray under the weight of constant frustration. Despite the mounting pressure, Karen remained resolute. She attended another fiery neighborhood meeting, listening patiently as people vented their frustrations. When it was her turn to speak, she addressed the crowd with quiet confidence. "Believe me, I don't enjoy causing inconvenience," she said. "But ask yourselves, why am I being forced to take such drastic measures? If the HOA hadn't targeted me with baseless fines and refused to negotiate, none of this would be happening. All I want is fairness, for them to admit they were wrong, and make things right. Her words didn't win over everyone, but they planted seeds of doubt in some minds. Could the HOA have gone too far? Was Karen justified in fighting back, even if her methods disrupted the community? As tempers flared and alliances shifted, one thing became clear. The battle over the toll booth wasn't just about a road anymore. It was about power, fairness, and whether standing up for yourself was worth the cost of upsetting those around you. And for Karen, the answer was simple. The legal battle between Karen and the HOA quickly became the talk of the town and beyond. When the HOA filed a lawsuit against her, claiming the toll booth was an illegal obstruction and harassment of residents, Karen didn't back down. Instead, she countersued, arguing that the HOA had violated her rights by imposing unjust fines and refusing to acknowledge her ownership of the road. The courtroom drama captivated everyone, turning what started as a neighborhood dispute into a David versus Goliath story with national appeal. As both sides prepared for trial, tensions in the community reached a boiling point. Some neighbors rallied behind Karen, organizing fundraisers to help cover her mounting legal fees. They set up lemonade stands, hosted bake sales, and even created T-shirts with slogans like Team Karen and Fairness over Fines. Others remained firmly against her, accusing her of holding the neighborhood hostage for personal revenge. Arguments erupted at grocery stores, school pickup lines, and backyard barbecues, dividing friends and families. The media frenzy grew louder, with reporters camping outside the courthouse during pre-trial hearings. Lawyers debated technicalities about property rights, private roads, and the limits of HOA authority. Experts were brought in to testify, including real estate attorneys, urban planners, and even historians who explained how similar disputes had played out in other communities. Every twist and turn made headlines, sparking debates on morning talk shows and late-night comedy routines. In court, Karen's lawyer presented a compelling case. He showed evidence of the HOA's baseless fines, highlighting inconsistencies in their enforcement of rules. For example, while Karen was fined thousands for overgrown shrubs, other homes with far worse landscaping issues received no penalties. The lawyer also argued that the HOA failed to follow proper procedures when issuing violations, making many of their claims invalid. Most importantly, he emphasized Karen's legal ownership of the road, citing decades-old property records that proved her right to control access. The HOA's defense rested heavily on the inconvenience caused to residents. Their attorney painted Karen as unreasonable and vindictive, accusing her of using the toll booth to punish innocent neighbors caught in the crossfire. Witnesses testified about missed workdays, spoiled groceries, and emotional distress caused by the blockade. But under cross-examination, several admitted they hadn't personally tried negotiating with Karen or pressuring the HOA to resolve the issue peacefully. Public opinion swayed heavily in Karen's favor as details of the case unfolded. Social media users shared stories of their own frustrating encounters with overbearing HOAs, praising Karen for standing up to institutional bullying. Even some local politicians weighed in, calling for reforms to prevent similar conflicts in the future. Meanwhile, Linda and the HOA board members faced growing scrutiny, with critics accusing them of mismanaging funds and prioritizing power over fairness. After weeks of testimony, the judge delivered a verdict that sent shockwaves through the community. The court ruled decisively in Karen's favor, dismissing all $50,000 in fines and ordering the HOA to reimburse her legal costs. The judge affirmed her ownership of the road and condemned the HOA's handling of the situation, calling it excessive and punitive. While the ruling allowed Karen to keep the toll booth if she chose, it also urged both parties to find a compromise that benefited the entire neighborhood. For Karen, the victory was bittersweet. She felt vindicated but knew the toll booth had strained relationships with people she once called friends. Still, she couldn't deny the sense of empowerment that came from standing up for herself and winning. As the dust settled, one thing was clear. This small suburban road had become a symbol of resilience, reminding everyone that sometimes fighting for fairness requires shaking things up in unexpected ways. With the courts ruling in her favor, Karen finally had the upper hand. The HOA was ordered to pay her legal fees and publicly acknowledge their mistakes, a rare moment of accountability for an organization known for its iron grip on the neighborhood. But instead of gloating or doubling down on the toll booth, Karen surprised everyone by choosing a more collaborative path forward. She announced that she would remove the toll booth, but only after implementing a new system designed to prevent future conflicts. Karen proposed creating a digital registry for anyone wishing to use the road. Residents could apply for free access passes, while visitors, delivery drivers, and service providers would need temporary permits issued online. It was a compromise that balanced her rights as the road's owner with the needs of the community. Most neighbors welcomed the solution, relieved to have their routines restored without completely giving up control to the HOA. The toll booth came down on a crisp Saturday morning, drawing a small crowd of curious onlookers. As the gate swung open for the first time in weeks, cheers erupted from some residents who waved at Karen as they drove through. Others remained silent, still harboring resentment over the disruption. Despite the mixed reactions, Karen felt a sense of closure. The battle had been exhausting, but it also taught her something valuable. Standing up for yourself doesn't mean shutting others out. It means finding ways to coexist while staying true to your principles. Behind the scenes, the HOA crumbled under the weight of public scrutiny. Linda resigned shortly after the trial, citing personal reasons, though many suspected she couldn't handle the backlash. Without her domineering presence, the board members struggled to regain trust. Attendance at meetings dwindled, and several homeowners called for dissolving the HOA altogether. In its place, a new community council emerged, volunteer-led and focused on collaboration rather than enforcement. This shift marked a turning point for the neighborhood, fostering a spirit of cooperation that had been missing for years. As life returned to normal, Karen found herself reflecting on everything she'd been through. What started as a simple desire to help her community had turned into a fight for justice, and not just for herself, but for all homeowners who felt powerless against rigid systems. Strangers reached out to thank her for inspiring them to challenge unfair practices in their own neighborhoods. Some even formed support groups online, sharing advice and resources for navigating similar disputes. Though relationships with certain neighbors remained strained, Karen worked hard to rebuild bridges. She hosted a block party to celebrate the end of the ordeal, inviting everyone to enjoy food, music, and laughter together. Not everyone attended, but those who did noticed a change in the air, a renewed sense of connection and understanding. Even Sarah, the retired teacher who had defended Karen during heated arguments, joked, "If this whole thing taught us anything, it's that we're stronger when we work together, and weaker when we let pride get in the way." Looking back, Karen realized the toll booth had served its purpose, not just as a means of protest, but as a catalyst for change. It forced people to confront uncomfortable truths about power dynamics, fairness, and accountability. And while the scars of the conflict would take time to heal, the neighborhood emerged stronger, wiser, and more united than before. In the end, Karen's story became a lesson in resilience and courage, a reminder that sometimes shaking things up is the only way to create lasting change. Her quiet suburban road might have started as a battleground, but it ended as a symbol of hope, proof that even in the face of overwhelming odds, one person can make a difference. And for Karen, that was worth every sleepless night, every argument, and every moment of doubt along the way.